Today I want to talk about the ground, or in other words, the practice of grounding. I want to start with the idea that we feel so much better in the summer. And why exactly is that? Aside from the influx of vitamin D, which converts into hormones that regulate our other sex hormones, and the vitamin D aiding in the absorption of all other absorbable vitamins, which of course allows us to operate more optimally, the reason we feel so good is simply the world around us and our increased exposure to it. Now, did you know that rubber-soled shoes in the United States were not produced until 1917? Prior to that, our shoes were made of leather, which is considered a conductive material, meaning that it's responsive to electromagnetic currents. And we'd wear those leather shoes to formal events. If we weren't wearing them, we wouldn't wear anything at all. We'd just walk around barefoot. I want you to consider the reality that electrical workers today wear rubber gloves and rubber boots to divert any electrical exposure. I also want you to consider that they always have a grounded line that connects down from their bodies to the earth. Should they come into accidental contact with a source of electricity, that electricity will travel through that grounded line and out to the earth, and it will leave them virtually unscathed. Similarly, outlets in your house are often grounded so that if a surge occurs, the flow of electricity will not cause a fire or an explosion or anything else, and instead it'll flow through and down into the earth. Now, go back to those rubber-soled shoes and consider that if we're wearing them and if we're isolated from the ground and we have no contact with the ground whatsoever and we encounter electricity, well, what do you think would happen? Speaking of electromagnetism, the world has its own electromagnetic pull, one of which marine mammals and birds use to navigate the planet innately because of its power and its persuasion. Without this electromagnetic frequency, these animals operate as if blind or lost. We've come to learn that humans have a same sense, which we activate in water, but its influence becomes apparent in the fact that when we are in ranges of overactive electrical frequency, our bodies respond. They either become disoriented or they become inflamed. EMF, or electromagnetic frequency, refers to the frequencies that travel all around us, pertinent to positive and negative charges. We refer to those as ions. Our bodies are conductive, meaning that we are subject to these electromagnetic frequencies and that we house and reflect them. When we are quote-unquote grounded, meaning there is nothing buffering the electrical signaling from moving through our bodies and back out into the ground, we experience none of the aforementioned symptoms. However, when we are isolated, our bodies respond with inflammation. In a study following 28 premature born infants, laying the infants on a conductive mat that was grounded reduced vagal nerve activity and heart rate variability in all 28 participants of the study. For reference, vagal nerve activity and heart rate variability, also known as HRV, are the current greatest predeterminations of athletic ability. Additionally, those prematurely born infants, were showing symptoms and side effects of anxiety and colic, which are expected in prematurely born babies. But when they were placed on the grounding mats, those infants' symptoms seemingly disappeared altogether. Now, these days, inflammation is such a buzz term that it's almost eye-rolling to mention. However, a discussion of isolating electromagnetic frequencies within our physical bodies wouldn't be complete without the mention of inflammation. At the root of many chronic diseases and quality of life symptoms, inflammation goes with many causes and effects. We pin it to things like stress, food types, illness, and more. But what if the reason for the majority of our inflammation is just that we've, quote-unquote, disevolved? We keep talking about this week by week, but this idea of disevolution is just putting something simply on our feet and disconnecting ourselves from the ground. We're no longer connected to the earth that we live on, that we're born on, that we're biologically meant to stand on. It is with this rationale that the practice of grounding, sometimes called earthing, has become so popular. It's also with this rationale that we feel so good in the summer, because there's no other time that we spend more exposed to the earth. There's no other time that we walk barefoot, run in the backyard, spend time at the beach or in the ocean. Yes, we're in the sun, but we're connected to the earth that we're born of and on. The great thing about grounding or earthing is that it's free, it's simple, and it's proven effective. All you have to do is remove the non-conductive elements of your environment, such as your shoes or staying in bed for too long or staying in the house for too long, and then you just get outside. And where you're able to, you reduce the amount of EMF channel that we're exposed to. Does that sound hippie to you? Maybe. I mean, it definitely did to me when I first heard of it. All of it did. 3G, 4G, 5G, turning your phone off because it would, melt your brain or anything like that. It used to drive me nuts. I didn't want to hear about it or burden myself with the idea that very recent technologies and modifications to our day-to-day life could have any symptom or side effect on me because it's inconvenient. And it's easier for me to believe that there are no side effects or no symptoms because then I don't have to deal with it. I don't have to go out of my way. But in recognizing the drastically decreasing health of the general public and all of the things that have changed in our environment since, let's say, 1917, when rubber was invented, and everything that's come since, we have to take with a grain of salt all of the evolutions that are happening within our society and be reasonable in the new clinical studies that are proving evidence for things like inflammation and stress and chronic disorders, for deregulation of even internal factors such as like the gut microbiome and more. All of these elements we tie into biohacking, but there are so many simple and beautiful ways to practice just being more of ourselves, really, being more close to what our biological purpose is supposed to be. So, yeah, hippie, definitely, but purposeful, free, simple. So why not? If you're still feeling that way, then I encourage for you to be as scientific and apprehensive as humanly possible. Go into your exposure to these therapies, concepts, and ideas with extreme apprehension and ask a lot of questions. That way, as you experience the symptoms, you're not projecting your intent onto the results. And instead, you're able to derive a realistic projection of what's really happening to you. I can tell you anecdotally that grounding, putting my feet on the earth or throwing my body into a water source has almost always made me feel intrinsically more clear and centered. And if that's the result that I yield from it, then just from peace of mind alone, I'm happy with what I'm able to take from these studies. The practice is to spend 20 minutes barefoot on the ground daily. So again, it's not really all that long. Even walking along the perimeter of your backyard a few times as you talk on the phone in the morning, or making sure that you do that once in the morning or once at night, it's sufficient. It'll make it work. And you can also throw yourself into a body of water, maybe at the beach or the ocean. And just like we talked about last week, that'll also utilize and activate your mammalian dive response. It helps to reduce inflammation and chronic stress by lowering your heart rate and improving upon your circulation. Now, there has been clinical reduction in chronic inflammation proven from grounding or earthing, particularly in patients with autoimmune disorders such as lupus, fibromyalgia, and rheumatoid arthritis. Participants have also noted deeper sleep, regulated moods, and better quality of life. The head of this movement's name is Clint Ober. He's the one that really has done all of the boots on the ground type evidence research because he's had a whole myriad of health effects that he's attempted to cure through grounding and earthing. So I'd encourage you to refer yourself to his pages, his documentaries, his podcast mentions, and all of the 30 plus years of extensive clinical backed research that he's done to prove this very immersive theory. You can definitely turn towards his documentary itself, Earthing, or refer to the Ben Greenfield Fitness podcast with him featured to get a bit of a synopsis that's more straightforward and a little bit more evidence-driven than the anecdotal practices that I'm offering to you today. However, in all that you practice, know that what brings us closer to the earth brings us closer to our purpose as beings to live interactively with the world around us. And finding your ground here is another means of accomplishing that. So even taking away all of the inflammation, the practice points, the reduction of symptoms and deregulated quality of life aspects, just being outside, being on the ground, and appreciating everything that's around us is a great meditative practice to begin with. So get out there and enjoy it. It's a beautiful world we live in. We should be grateful to be here. Practice that, and the rest will speak for itself. I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.